Video and photo backlogs can leave you overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out. We've been there, and our fears of outsourcing stopped us in the past. Can you find an editor as invested in your brand as you are? Will other photographers and filmmakers we network with look down on us for not editing everything on our own? That fear of outsourcing can be detrimental to your career. That's why we love our partnership with Weditor. Their attention to details with not only our work, but also their care for their clients through all steps of the outsourcing process lets us fully step back from editing and focus on what we love, knowing our work is receiving the attention it needs. More than just editing, Weditor is passionate about demystifying the outsourcing market. Follow Weditor on Instagram at we_r_Weditor for free educational tips, tools, and resources to guide you through the insanity of today's editing market. For an even deeper dive, follow Weditor's blog at weditor.com/outsourcing.
Welcome to the We Got You podcast, a network curated for wedding photographers and filmmakers that dives deep into the strategies and tactics to transitioning a side hustle in the wedding industry into a full-time, thriving career. We're your hosts, luxury wedding filmmaker Emma K. Films and luxury destination wedding photographer Hannah Brook Photography. It wasn't too long ago that we picked up our cameras for the first time, having absolutely no idea where it would lead us. Years later, we're traveling the globe for beautiful destination weddings, built our dream lifestyles, and run multi-six-figure careers. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't easy, but it is attainable and so worth it. And we're ready to teach you our strategies. Covering a variety of topics from both our firsthand experiences and reputable guest speakers' insights crucial for business growth, we're exploring the art of marketing within your niche, discussing effective ways to attract and retain clients, leverage social media, and build a strong online presence, and so much more. We're not shying away from talking through the challenges of the wedding industry and offering realistic solutions to navigate them successfully. We emphasize the importance of networking, establishing meaningful relationships with clients, and continuously honing one's craft to stand out in a competitive market. This is the We Got You podcast. Hello, We Got You podcast. We are so excited that you are here with us this morning. It's Monday. It's a new start to the week, whether you're listening in your car, whether you're listening in your office, maybe you're on your way to work or you're working from home, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we are so truly thankful that you are here listening to another episode. And I couldn't be more excited, honestly, because this week we have the honor of sitting down with world-renowned luxury wedding photographer and educator and beautiful mother, Anni Graham. Anni, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Well, thank you so much for being on today's episode. I've personally had the honor of filming with Anni over the past few years, and I genuinely can't tell you how much she has inspired me as a creative, but really shaped my perspective owning a more non-traditional editing style, specifically in the luxury market. So today's episode is really genuinely for anyone who feels like they have a unique editing style that really doesn't follow the course of the mainstream style of your niche, but you're really struggling to embrace it or even recognize maybe is there a space for that in your desired market. So before we get started, Anni, we would just love to have you introduce yourself for anyone who's listening who may not know you. Give us your Instagram handle, where you're based, and we would love to know kind of just how you got started and how long you've been doing wedding photography.
Sure. I live in Oregon. My Instagram handle is Anni Graham. Everything's Anni Graham. I've been doing this for a while. I've done full-time business since 2016, beginning of 2017, however many years that's been. And then, but before that, I did it pretty part-time. I probably shot my first wedding. I think I found this recently on an old Flickr account. Don't find it. It's still live. I think the first wedding I shot was in 2008. And so it's been a really long time. I worked for wedding photographers for a little bit. It was kind of, my foot was half in, half out for a long time before I got married. I kind of fell in love with it from this totally different perspective. And I decided, okay, I guess weddings are okay. I can see the value in it. And I really needed that connection for me to go in and do it full time. So I've been doing that now since 2017. And then pretty seamlessly, as soon as I started, people just started asking me to come and teach at workshops. And I felt totally and completely underqualified and inexperienced to do that. but I did it anyways because, you just have to keep moving forward. And so I started doing education in like 2017, right when I started. And don't worry, I was very candid. I had no idea what I'm doing, but this is what I'm doing. People loved it. Now I feel like I'm a little more in a groove of education and all of that. So a couple years ago, we started immersed education, first as a workshop, and now it's completely, well, I guess not completely, but mostly online. So my world and life is motherhood. I have 2 little babies. I've kind of transitioned. I used to shoot mostly elopements. Now I do mostly like high-end luxury weddings. It's a space I'm still getting my foot in the door with. And so that's a process. But yeah, mom, life, luxury weddings, and education is like the 3 pillars to my life at the moment.
It's so amazing because I feel like having somebody on here who genuinely, in my eyes, like does it all. Like you are a mom, you have a business, and like you are in those areas where I know like so many people even listening really want to grow in is really like inspiring, because a lot of times it's almost like you kind of have to pick and choose, or if you choose one, the other one's going to suffer. But like really getting to hear that you do it all and you are incredible at it is amazing to have you on here.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It has been a big, feels really long. I've only had kids for 2.5 years now, but it feels like this big, long back and forth of how do I balance this, totally disappearing online, completely transitioning my business from elopements to weddings, to then let's do online education. And I don't feel like I'm in any way a workaholic. I don't work more than a couple hours a day.
That's
I
amazing.
really, really value life at home. I really, really value being present with my kids and sleeping with my kids and being with my kids. And somehow I'm also trying to do all this other stuff with work. I don't know, maybe I'm just totally an overachiever, but it's just a long journey of balance and therapy and figuring out how to do this well, because I do think that this is really the secret. I did it before I had kids. If you're trying to do this while you have kids, it's just too hard. But I had established my business and my education before I had kids. Then bringing kids into it was like, okay, now how do I balance something that I've already figured out with something that I'm still figuring out, motherhood, Anyways, I was thinking about that the other day, because I feel like a lot of moms will come to me asking for advice on how to balance, even just like, how do you be on Instagram for an hour a day? That feels like way too much. And I'm like, oh, I know. And I think it's just made a really big difference that I did it all first. And then I threw kids into the mix.
Oh, definitely. I always like joke with people too. Like if I had known what all went into building a wedding photography business, I like don't know if I would start, because it's just so much. And it's almost like that innocence is bliss, and taking it a piece at a time, taking that first year and really learning and growing and changing, and then taking that next year. And then, as you grow, learning more. And I feel like it's the same thing with kids, like adding kids, like you're just taking it piece by piece, and you never want to bite off more than you can chew. And it really is just like learning balance as you go.
Yeah. And I've been doing this for a while. I think a lot of people don't truly know that I started shooting and delivering weddings before Instagram even existed. Like delivered weddings on a CD. Computers don't even have CD drives anymore. That was my thing, with like a cute little clear plastic cover for it. It was very cool. Edited all my images in Photoshop. Made the whites of the eyes brighter, Yeah. It took me a long time to make pictures that I feel proud of. A long time.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, and for everyone who's listening who might not know your journey as a wedding photographer, like we would really love to kind of dive into that and have you take us through how you got started as an elopement photographer, shifting into the luxury elopement space, and really kind of how you decided to pivot to more of the luxury wedding market.
Yes. So weddings started. I think how it kind of starts for everybody is like, I guess I was pursuing photography way more than I was pursuing weddings. Weddings was very not cool until like maybe 8 years ago. It became cool. was not cool to be a wedding photographer when I started photography. So I was more interested in photojournalism. That's what I studied. I actually studied it in college for a bit. I took some courses in South Africa, and that was really, really a huge shift in my quality of work and all of that. And weddings just kind of crept in because, you know, when you know a photographer and you don't have any money, that's who you ask to shoot your wedding. So those are the weddings I started with. Freebies, friends, $100. Then it was like, I need to pay rent. I know how to shoot a wedding. Scroll on Craigslist, $100. There we go. That's about half of rent. And I would shoot $100 Craigslist wedding. It was great. I did that for a few years. I guess I just feel like I fell into it. And then, like I said, it wasn't until I got married that I felt like this was something that I actually wanted to pursue and put all of this like storytelling, photojournalism version of what I was actually pursuing into weddings. And it was like very randomly around the time that elopement started becoming actual things and not just like a private runaway event. And so I personally had a really small wedding. We only had 30 people, which I would say is considered as a small wedding or an elopement for a lot of people. And so when I started my business, I was like, okay, I can't start an elopement. It's like hardly even a thing. I think there had been like 2 famous elopements at that point. And so I was like, I need to just like learn how to run a business and like be a businesswoman, because I really don't know how to do that, because it was just Craigslist weddings and freebies for friends. So that first year in 2017, I really kind of put a lot of time and energy and effort into just like figuring out business. So I was shooting weddings and growing Instagram and all the things that you do, marketing, website, all of that. Gosh, I felt like I was changing my website like every month. Why am I putting so much time and energy into this? Let's change the whole thing. I felt really influenced by a lot of other wedding photographers. I was not really in a place where I was doing my own thing. It wasn't like I was copying, but I was like, oh, this is what you have to do to be successful. I'll do that. But it wasn't me. So I was just kind of running with the crowd for a long time, really confused as to what I was really supposed to be doing. And by the end of that very first year, I was so burnt out. And I remember booking a mentor session with a photographer, and I was like, I just don't know what to do. Like, my work just doesn't feel like my own. I don't feel connected to it. I feel lost. I feel invisible. I was booking all this stuff and shooting, and I was very busy, but I just felt so disconnected. And he pretty much totally called me out and was like, yeah, you got to stop looking at other people. You got to figure out what you want to do. It was really intimidating, though, to kind of go out on my own and really put my own stuff out there. I think it's such a vulnerable thing that a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to. And a lot of what you feel in the beginning. Anyway, so then I started kind of realizing that, okay, I fell in love with this and decided to go into it full time because of how much I loved small weddings and elopements. That really feels like an extension of who I am. And so by the end of 2018, that next year, I had officially decided to stop taking on full weddings and just do elopements. And I did that for a few years, and it was great. And then I got pregnant, and that first year that I had a kid, trying to figure out how to travel as much as I was and shoot elopements and all of that was just like, oh my gosh, this is so hectic. I would bring my husband and baby along with me, and they would hang out in the hotel and I would go shoot. It was fun and all, but it just didn't feel like it was fulfilling me like that it did in the very beginning, for a lot of lifestyle reasons and a lot of like, I don't know, I think you change and grow as you discover more about yourself in the world of photography, as I have over the last decade. And I just felt like there was this big shift happening, and I felt like it was back to weddings, but like a higher end wedding with like really incredible, talented, sought after like florists who do these ridiculous installations that you're like, I don't even understand how you did that. like that was really fascinating to me. Was there was this level of creativity that didn't quite exist in elopements. It was very much about the experience and the place and the intimacy of it all. But then there was this like art and craft and collaboration with vendors that I felt was missing a little bit for me. And I started feeling that a little bit when we were doing all these immersed workshops. And anyways, not decided. It's more like I realized that that's kind of where I was being pulled. So last year I decided, oh gosh, after all the podcasts I've been on and all the workshops that I've taught at where I just preached elopements, here I am making the decision to go back into weddings, but not just regular weddings, like super high end, very competitive, like really hard to get into high end luxury weddings. Oh, and I'm pregnant again and I'm having another baby. Are you serious? Really? Is this what you want to do? And you're having a baby in the summer, so you can't work and you're going to be super pregnant. You have to say no to all these weddings. And here I am trying to make this giant transition in my life. It was really, really a tough year for like business wise, because it was so much of coming back to, okay, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not able to work and grow and put all this time and energy into this huge transition. But let's come back to, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And going back to the basics. What do I know about the luxury wedding industry and the wedding industry in general, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking too much, but basically,
no,
I
we
feel
love
like
it.
I've gone through these phases in wedding photography. And I think the most recent one has been the most interesting because it almost feels like I'm not embarrassed of it, but everyone wants to know why. Because I kind of became known as this elopement photographer. I grew into it right as the elopement industry was growing. And so I kind of was one of the people that people just knew I was one of the elopement. That was the other thing too. It's just as terrifying when I decided to only do elopements because there just wasn't that many people doing it. And I was like, seriously, I'm going to say no to these people who want to pay me $10,000 to shoot their wedding at this beautiful venue because I want to shoot an elopement for $8,000 maybe, but most of that is going towards travel fees because they're all in these ridiculous locations. Like, anyways, and I probably only knew like 2 or 3 other people who were doing elopements full time. And I was like, am I really going to be able to book out my whole year? Had none booked and was like, yeah, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this now. And I have to do this, like, I have to draw a line in the sand and not be this half in, half out, wishy-washy version of an elopement photographer. I want to go all in. It's kind of my thing, I guess. So I went all in with nothing booked, and I ended up having more than I could ever ask for shooting elopements. And now I'm doing the same thing with nothing booked, saying I'm a luxury elopement wedding, not an elopement. I'm a luxury wedding photographer in a space that I haven't been in years, with content that I don't have because it's all elopements, vendor relations that don't exist, and, pregnant and having a baby. So can't build my portfolio. 2023 was just wild. It was a huge risk that I took on myself, and that was really, really vulnerable. And I just kind of felt like I was like building my business from scratch again. And but it's going great now. It's funny how you panic. When you make such a big decision, I think a lot of people just panic and then they go back like, never mind, this isn't working for me. But there is this really, really uncomfortable period of time that you just have to like keep your 2 feet on the floor and stay there little longer. And then it kind of slowly starts to flow as you pivot. And it's totally terrifying. But yeah, now I shoot like high-end luxury weddings, and it's kind of been a crazy process getting into this industry. And it's been a wild ride the last few years, making so many changes all the time in my life and in my business.
Okay, I love just how vulnerable you were about your story. And I wish that more people were open about that, because I think even Hannah and I in our own businesses have related to that so much, where it can be really easy to, we want to stay where we're comfortable, right? And so it's like to take this risk where at that time you had no elopements booked and you're going into it thinking like, I need to fill my whole calendar, but here you are with nothing booked. It's in those moments where a lot of people, we want to like revert back to where we're comfortable. We want to just go back to like, okay, well, let me just do what I know I can do. But it's in those moments where you have to take the risk. You have to do something that's going to be so terrifying and so scary if it doesn't work out, because that's the only option you have. And it's like in those moments, what I've found is it pushes you so much more to accomplish it, to where then you you have to make it work. And it can be really easy as entrepreneurs to get scared and revert to what we're comfortable with. And so I think it's just so inspiring to hear that, because I've even known in my own journey, there have been moments where it's like, you know, like when I first started my business, just like putting this camera and this drone on my personal credit card and like wondering like, where the heck am I going to get the money to pay this off? Just like the littlest things like that, where it's scary, but it's so worth it taking that risk. And, you know, the other thing that I was thinking about when you were sharing your story is I love that your story wasn't just this traditional, like climbing the ladder type approach. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, for a lot of wedding photographers and videographers, we come into this career thinking that, well, we start here and then like one day, like success is like being in the luxury market. But it's not. It's not. You have to find where you value your time and your energy and where you have that passion for. And like even for you, Annie, you're like, well, I started with weddings and then I dove into elopements and now I'm back in the luxury space. And it's really cool because a lot of us see it as like, well, the luxury is like end all do all, right? But for so many people out there, the elopement space could be your end all do all. The destination space could be your end all do all. There's not a certain route that you have to go or you have to be as a wedding photographer or a wedding videographer. And I just think it's really cool, like hearing you kind of pivot from one avenue to the other and back, because that's what made you happy. And you're like, you know what, when I was done shooting elopements, like you felt it in your heart. You're like, I know that this isn't where I want to pour my energy into anymore. And I really want to transition to luxury. It wasn't like that next step that you had to do in order to like be successful.
I think too, if you're trying to kind of follow what you think is like the cookie cutter ladder or whatever it is, you're trying to put yourself in this was just my whole first year in business, right? I was like trying to put myself into situations or do business in a certain way because that's what I was supposed to do. And it was just such immediate burnout. And I learned that very first year in business that like, this is not what I can do. This is not going to sustain me. This is just whatever I'm supposed to do. I've got to just completely let it go, because who knows? I think I've like met so many photographers from doing education in other countries where there's all these other expectations and all these other, it's like you live in this little world and you're on Instagram and you're just sucked into the world all day. And you're just like, all these messages are pouring at you that this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you should be doing, or this is like where you need to get or where you should be now, because you've been doing this for this many years, which means you should be this far along. And such immediate burnout. And I learned so hard in such a painful way that first year that it has to come from within. And I have to also be willing and open to letting that change. And like, I kind of go through this reassessment at the end of every year, at the end of every season, where I'm like, all right, what is it going to look like this next year? What am I feeling? What's going on in my life? What's going on with my family? How do I want to spend my time and energy right now? And what is inspiring me? What's fueling me? What's giving me a lot of, like that, as an artist, you kind of need that fulfillment level to hit a certain mark for you to, very just like openly putting your time and energy into it. If you're like burnt out and shooting way too much and then complaining online about it all the time, so cringy. something's wrong. You got to take a step back and see what is going on here, because something's just not quite adding up. And I think having that all come from within has really changed the way that I do business on like a year-to-year basis, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and even like you said, like reassessing that every year, it's crazy. I feel like a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And like they make this big decision to start their business, which like by no means is a small choice. Like that's huge and that's a big risk. And it's really exciting to see people enter that space. But then I think a lot of people think, okay, that's where my risk ends, or like that's when those changes end, or okay, I did that big thing. Now it's going to be, okay, now that I've decided, it's going to be kind of like an easy, smooth sailing, like you just grow. But it's even like when you're burnt out in the first year, you have to make those changes and that risk of like, okay, let me raise my prices so I'm not feeling burnt out. So I'm able to work less for more, and like continually changing that year to year so that you're feeling like you're getting that fulfillment, you're not getting burnt out. But at the same time, like you have to do things that make you uncomfortable. You can't just expect, okay, I did that one big risk or that one big challenge and like now we're good to go. Like it is a consistent, you're constantly challenging yourself, even just on wedding days. Like you said, like, taking on what a wedding day, like those big floral pieces that are really inspiring. Like, okay, how can you document that? Like what different pieces of wedding days can you really look at and like bring into with like a new set of eyes? You're always changing and growing and doing something different, where the risk doesn't end when you start a business. Is kind of where it starts.
Yes, 100%. And I think too, there was something that happened with me with elopements where it just got real comfortable. I felt like I had kind of reached a ceiling a little bit and was like, I don't think things are going to change much from here. And that made me uncomfortable, where I was like, I need and love and want a challenge and a risk, because I know deep down that is really the only way that you can continue to grow, is doing things that are really scary and intimidating and feel really risky and uncomfortable. That's, like you said, Emma, that's like where all the growth happens, because then you rise to the occasion. I always think of like, what would I do different if somebody was paying me like $50,000 to shoot a wedding? Maybe I'll get there one day. But like, what would you do different? Like, imagine you shoot weddings for like $3,000. What would you do different if somebody was paying you $50,000? How would you rise to the occasion? Would you do the same thing, or would you completely do everything different? Bring on an entire team, totally get all new gear, completely refine your entire editing style. Like, okay, why aren't you doing that now? Why are there no jobs that are making you feel that way? And I've really fallen in love, I think, with the luxury market, because every wedding is like, how am I going to rise to the occasion? What am I going to do different this time? Okay, let's look at gear. Let's look at team. Let's look at location. Let's look at content. Let's look at, I don't know, just everything. I nitpick and go through with a fine-tooth comb to figure out how to make this the best project I've ever done. And guess what? At the end of it, there's always my best work up to that point, because I put so much time and energy into it. And it's like exponential growth when you look at things that way. And when you're in situations where you feel not overpaid, but like you're going to have to deliver. There's no question about it. That's where I want to be, because that's when I create some really knockout work and feel like really invigorated by the experience. Totally shitting my pants the entire time up until, delivery, all of that. I'm like, oh my God. And I look back and I'm like, why did I do this? Why did I do that? Why do I do that? Very critical. But I don't know. I'd just rather be in that place than to be smooth sailing doing, fall mini sessions for $200 and never really, I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I think those are great for people, great for connecting, great for community. Like such an incredible gift the photographer can do for somebody. But I'm looking for challenges.
Does your current client delivery system feel unexciting, limiting, and boring? Maybe you're still using good old Google Drive or Dropbox to deliver your clients' wedding films. If the answer to these is yes, it's time to level up your video delivery experience with VidFlow. VidFlow is a pay-per-use online platform that allows you to deliver fully branded websites for each of your clients. While being incredibly affordable, VidFlow is accessible on mobile, desktop, and smart TVs with included long-term hosting so that your clients can truly enjoy the entire experience when receiving their wedding films. When I first found VidFlow, it was such an easy switch that truly benefited my business substantially. With so many incredible features and options for customization and personalization, VidFlow continues to wow my clients time and time again. You can find VidFlow on Instagram or visit their website at vidflow.co. Use our code WGY20 for 20% off a yearly premium membership and level up your client experience today with VidFlow.
Well, and I know that you had briefly mentioned too, editing is one of those things. If you were shooting a $50,000 wedding, how would things change? Even the thought of editing, so many people are boxed in of what their perception of a luxury editing looks like, or, what you're supposed to edit or, those trends and fads. So we'd really like to dive into, your editing style. How would you feel is the best way to describe what your current editing style is?
That's such a hard question for me to answer. It's so interesting. Okay, I was thinking about this, and because I've been looking at my editing style and, the luxury space, and gosh, I've just thought about this so much because I feel like the luxury space is very saturated with film, medium format film, which is beautiful and amazing, but it has a certain color palette and look to your images that truly is timeless, because film today is going to be the same film look in 50 years and was the same film look 50 years ago. Obviously the cameras and all of that are changing, but film really does have this very, very timeless quality. So it makes sense to me that it's almost like the more into luxury you go, things get less and less and less experimental and creative, and more predictable. That timeless quality, not vintage, nostalgic, and timeless in a way that's you don't know if that picture was taken 20 years ago or if it was taken yesterday. And the posing gets very less run around and energy that I see a lot of. I did this, and I see a lot of photographers still doing with weddings. Obviously, I think there's just this different genre for it, and more into this sophisticated, a little bit more posed. You're shooting somebody asked me this other day too, and I was like, that's such an interesting question. It's shooting a celebrity. You'd never ask them to twirl around.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's you're just looking at the camera. It's this very sophisticated, composed moment. And it's so different than I think what a lot of photographers do with their clients and what I have done with people in the past. And I'm why is that? Why is it that the more into high-end sophistication, luxury exclusive world, the photographer becomes smaller in a way where
it
it's
is so true.
Very documentary. You're just taking pictures as they come, or look at the camera. It's just really different.
Yeah.
And then you're in that space and you're taking pictures of these people, and you're I want to do this in a different way. And you come in and you realize that's where they feel comfortable. And I want people to feel comfortable. And that sophisticated picture of them standing and looking at the camera is what they see and envision and want. And it's just different for a client that I was shooting 4 years ago. Where I'm cropping and doing all this crazy stuff, get in, super emotional, with the hair and hugging, kissing, black and white, it's just different, right? So going into this luxury space, I feel editing has really been this big topic of just conversation with mentors and friends and myself, trying to figure out how can I bring myself into this space? Because, well, first of all, I think my style has just changed a lot too in the last few years. But in the end, there's something that I'm always looking for in my work. I want like this level of creativity and emotion. And I just want something different. And I see there are a couple of photographers in the luxury space that do that shoot on film, but it's not just like your traditional, really light and airy look and aesthetic. They're much more creative. And it's interesting because I feel like the clients that they work with are that way too. They reflect that back. There has to be more people like that who want something different. And the high-end luxury market is incredibly competitive. It's very like who you know, referral based. Like you can't just put a bunch of hashtags on your picture and hope that you're going to get noticed. Like unless it's like the film industry in LA. Unless you really know somebody, you're not getting in because you have to be referred by name. And by being referred by name, you have to know somebody in person. And to know them in person, you have to have worked with them. But how in the hell will you ever work with them? So it just feels like this impossible step. And anyways, that's a totally different topic. But I guess I feel like in this really competitive world of luxury weddings, what am I doing different? That's a question that I've always had, even in elopements. Like, what am I doing different? How am I bringing myself to this? Because I can never go back to that place where I am just following the trends and doing what I'm supposed to be doing and editing in a way that feels like so far from me, but, this is what is expected or whatever. Like, no, I feel like one way that I do that is just like really, really curating the type of work that I put out there. Like if you look at an entire gallery, you'd probably see that my editing style probably not closely matches what like you would think of as a light and airy wedding photographer. But yeah, I'm going for a timeless look. And my editing has changed a lot in the last few years. But what am I sharing online? That's totally different than what like a full gallery will look like, because I am going for this very specific aesthetic and this very specific even like color palette. And I'm going for that because I want to give the impression that this is the type of wedding photographer that I am in the luxury space. And I want somebody, a wedding planner, whoever, who wants that, immediately think of me.
Right.
I couldn't think of like a better marketing strategy to stand out and be different and not follow the crowd and not follow all the trends, but to really find yourself in the space. Because
and you know that there are people out there that are...
You might not get as many inquiries, you might not get as many people booking you, but the people that do, the people that like want you above everyone else, there's no competition. And I found, there's this wedding that I shot in New York that recently got featured and is featured now on Over the Moon. And I love this story because it's tied up in my own personal stuff too. But I booked the wedding, found out I was pregnant, and had to cancel. And I was really devastated because I was really excited about it, but I booked it through a planner. So I just didn't really know like too much about the wedding yet and the whole process and everything. But I was super bummed because New York wedding, there's something different to it. And I was really pumped about it. Anyways, they booked another photographer. I was happy for them. I was just gonna cry myself, but it's fine. I had a baby. It was great. Okay. Moving on, letting go of it. And then I had a miscarriage and it was really sad. And it's not like I announced it or anything, went public about it or whatever. But, when that bride found out that I had a miscarriage and wasn't pregnant anymore, she canceled the photographer that she booked, like super high-end luxury, well-known photographer that she booked, to rehire me because that's the style that she wanted. And she just wasn't quite sure that she was like a perfect fit with that other photographer that she had booked. And she came back and I shot the wedding, and it was beautiful and amazing and gorgeous. And it was like, I, didn't meet her. She didn't like find me on Instagram. It was all through a planner, referral, all of that. But it was like, when I met them, the couple, I was like, oh my gosh, you are 100% my couple. The level of like intention and creativity and like, we want to be present. We don't want anything contrived. We want everything to feel like just move through the day. I mean, if I could just like write a list for you right now of like what my ideal shooting situations would be in terms of like emotion and presence and creativity and all of that all on a page, that was like them to a T, 100%. And, wow. I mean, how could I have ever found that? I don't know. It just felt so meant to be. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's because when she found me, she resonated with what I was putting out there, and she resonated with it in a different way than anyone else, because my style was different. My editing was different. Yeah. The way that I was sharing my content and curating my content was different. She really, really connected with the impression that I was putting out there, and she was willing to pay for it. I mean, over like other people who have been in this luxury space for a lot longer. And I feel like I always come back to that in conversations like this, because I feel like there is space for it. There are people that want it 100%. And there are definitely going to be people that resonate with something different. Let me tell you, I wish I could interview all the couples out there who are having luxury weddings in 2024. I bet there's someone who's like, does everyone look the same? Yeah. Is there anything different? Like there's this staleness and emotionless and what is it about that certain genre of wedding photos that I just feel no connection to? There's got to be someone else who feels that same way too. And here I am presenting something different. And there's going to be no question in their mind that I'm the only photographer for them. And I have no other competition. And that's where I want to be. So that's kind of what gave me the confidence to be different.
And I love like how confident you are in like owning your style. I will never forget when we had shot together in December of 2022. I was like, I had shot one luxury wedding that year, and I was like brand new to it, and I was trying to get in. And I just remember, as a videographer specifically, everyone that I had seen do wedding video in the luxury market had a very, very light, white, and airy style. And I remember I was so down on myself, feeling like I had to change my style in order to get in. And I was sitting at a table with you, and I had asked you, and I looked up to your style so much, because here I was seeing you present a style that was so vastly different than this I don't know if mainstream is the word, don't cancel me for it, but this mainstream editing style that we can see in the luxury market. And here you were, Annie, doing something so different. And I just remember being like, Annie, is there space for me? Do you think that as a filmmaker who's doing something different, like, can I actually get in? Can I actually like build a sustainable year worth of bookings off of having an editing style that is much more earthy, natural toned than necessarily like this very bright white and airy look? And I'll never, ever forget you just looking at me and being like, there will always be space for you. Like, own it confidently and know that there are always people that will want you. And that entire conversation just really like stuck with me moving forward, and being like, no, like I just need to own the style that I have, own it confidently, knowing that there are people out there who will want to book me. And if I can own it confidently, instead of going in with this mindset, like the scarcity mindset of feeling like I have to change and do things that all the other videographers want to do, there are couples out there that want you for your style, but you have to, as cliche as it sounds, you have to be confident in what you have. And so I'll just never forget that conversation that we had, because honestly, that transformed myself going into the luxury market with the style that I had. And so like, I'd love to know, do you feel like your editing style is like, because especially the aesthetic that you have on your Instagram, it is not that super light, white, and airy look that you see, right? I mean, for anyone out there, like right now, if you haven't looked at Annie's Instagram, like right this second, as you're listening to this episode, I want you to jump on Instagram and look at her aesthetic that she has created. Like, Annie, would you say like, it is widely accepted in the luxury market? Like, I guess, like, what was your mindset behind just knowing, like, was it easy for you, I guess, to find your seat at the table when dealing with high-end planners and clients when having a portfolio, this aesthetic that is different than the mainstream?
I would say yes. Shockingly, yes. It's there. There are so many different types of people out there. And I think the best part about it is people like have no question. I have no competition. They're like, they could be presented with maybe 2 or 3 options. And my goal is to stand out from whoever they are. And I think just showing more of who I really am and what I really thrive at. That's the other thing too, is like, oh my gosh, if I tried to be and shoot and deliver something that I didn't feel connected to, that didn't feel like what I was really in love with, I would feel so uncomfortable and so like vulnerable and fake and all of it, you know, to rise to the occasion, to do more than I think that I can, to feel like I have a place in this really competitive market. I have to show up 100% as me and not anybody else. And honestly, I think the type of people that I want that are more creative and artistic and have an eye for it could pick me out of a crowd knowing with so much confidence. It gives them so much it gives people a lot of confidence to see a lot of consistency in who you are coming through in your work. If you're flip-flopping all over the place, and they're just too bad for you, they're not going to love it. My style is attracting a different client, and it's not every luxury client, but the type of people I'm attracting is connecting with the type of work that I deeply want to create and know how to create. So it's like, do I have a place in the market? I don't even know if that's like an important question, because it's like, how could I do it any different way? Because you wouldn't even be considered for a place in the market if you were trying to be somebody that you weren't. Because at this level, you have to be experienced, confident. You have to know your gear, your style, how you're going to shoot, what you're going to do. You just have to have this other level of experience in this world. And if you're coming in trying to be somebody that you're not going to have a place at the table. So it's like, can you even ask that question? Because if you're just trying to fall into a cookie cutter mold of what a luxury wedding photographer seems to need to be, I don't know if you're going to fill those shoes. And I would probably be attracting a client that I absolutely would really have a hard time shooting. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I like these weddings and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so over the top. This is crazy. I know that that is not the type of wedding that I would just really love shooting. I don't love every wedding I see out there. So why would I try to be a photographer for that type of a wedding? It all clicks together and it all makes sense if you just come back to knowing who you are and then like accepting and loving what you do and how you do it different, and know that that is the best place to be, not just another light and airy photographer. It is the best place to be different and to bring something different to a space and to bring a different perspective. And it's almost like I want to bring a different level of like I want my clients to show up too and to be present and to be themselves. And I have to do that if I want them to do that. And it's a disservice to the entire experience if they don't do that too. So I hope I'm attracting those type of people, because that's what I'm willing to leave home for.
Yeah. Well, and I hope anybody who like is struggling with, comparing their work to anybody else's or self-confidence in the industry, I hope they're listening to this episode, because if there's anything you can pull away, I feel like it's almost that permission to be exactly who you are, and not just because of the cliche, like be authentic, but like there's actually a backing to it, like even everything you just said, like there is a reason why being who you are, shooting and, like really finding out your why, discovering what really keeps you motivated, there's a reason that works. And there's a reason why everyone's not doing the exact same thing, like if we are all truly fully like finding out what gets us out of bed, what gets us to a wedding day, what keeps us shooting for 10 hours a day, when our backs are hurting and feet are hurting, like what keeps us excited and creative and everything, that is that why as to it is successful being authentic, like it is, you can be successful being yourself and not being that cookie cutter and creating almost like your own lane in the industry and not feeling like you have to dive into somebody else's. And honestly, I absolutely just like love listening to your perspective too, because I feel like it's so refreshing in the industry, and it's so, I don't know, not something that we typically hear. Like Emma had said earlier, like I feel like so many people, it's the story of like, oh, climbing the ladder, like moving on from one to another, and yours is just so like, I feel like more normal to what most people experience in the industry of like figuring out where they want to go, what challenges them, what makes them excited, what is, that next nervous step, or doing something when you're scared. So could probably listen to you all day, and am seriously so thankful that you're on here and sharing like your words of wisdom and everything with our audience. But before we close the episode, we'd really love to get like your Instagram handle again. And I know a bit of insight into the education platforms that you've created that you chatted with us earlier about, but just kind of a little run back through of Instagram, website, education, everything, so that anybody out there listening can follow along and learn more from you.
Yeah. Instagram is just Anni Graham. You can DM me, we can chat, we can talk about editing styles. I could do it all day. And then annigraham.com is where all my work is. If you want to go check it out, see what exists, what can exist in the luxury space, if you decide you want to do it too. And in immersed education is where I'm doing all of my online education now too. And we have some big new things coming out this year, because apparently I can't not do anything new every year. So immersed is growing and changing this year, and we're coming out with something really big and really exciting. So if you haven't heard an announcement for that yet, go follow Immersed Education. That's where I share all of my personal life and education and photography related things. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anni, for coming on here. And yeah, this is like just such a breath of fresh air listening to, and for everyone out there who has felt like they have been struggling, honestly, with just like knowing their direction. Not even necessarily like their editing style, but just really like knowing where they want to go with their career and what niche they want to follow. And so, yeah, we're so glad that you were here listening today, and we will see you next week on the We Got You podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. We would absolutely love it if you could take an extra minute to leave us a review and let us know what you think. DM us a screenshot of it and we'll send you a coffee on us. If you want access to an exclusive community, rad freebies, giveaways, and wedding referrals, then join our Facebook group today. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you're following along on Instagram at WeGotYou_podcast to stay up to date. We'll see you next week on the We Got You podcast.